Welcome, everyone, to Music Junkies, a podcast about people sharing extraordinary stories about how music has impacted their lives.
Welcome, everyone, to Music Junkies. I'm your host, Annette Smith. And who is the music god? He's a single father, pulp culture enthusiast, book addict, movie fan, and lifelong music collector. He's currently working on his first book, a horror story that combines the love of horror, metal music, and truck stops, which I love. He's been a musician, singer, songwriter, radio host, concert promoter, and he hosts a podcast called Of the Noise Report. Please welcome CJ Payne. Welcome to the show, my friend.
It's Plain, P-L-A-I-N.
Oh, it's Plain. Sorry.
Yeah, my Plain on me.
Payne. You should change it. It would suit your personality for sure.
You know what? I heard all the jokes growing up.
I have to make a comment. You have like one of my favorite albums in the world on the wall behind you, and that's that Purple Rain album. That is like one. I love Prince. I think he doesn't get enough credit. He probably does get lots of credit, but I love Prince. I love Prince. Old school Prince. Love. But I love it. You have some Maiden and some AC/DC. I love it.
All-time favorite right there, Pink Floyd.
Nice. I love it.
Got the Goonies, got My Hero Academia, got Bob Marley over there.
I love it.
I built my own little studio, actually. We had a big walk-in closet, and I had all my stuff in the dining room, and as you can imagine, with a wife and 4 kids in the house, it was nearly impossible to record anything.
Yeah.
So she decided to lose her mind and go off the proverbial fucking rails, and she had an affair and all that shit. So once all that shit happened, I decided, you know what?
You're going to go back in the closet.
I come upstairs and I was pulling all her shit out of here, and I got to looking at it. I'm like, man, I measured it and I was like, 11'6" long and 6.5 wide. Just a perfect size for a small little home studio, and took everything out, painted it, hung up all my posters, started to soundproof it, put all my stuff in here, and we smacked a bottle of champagne on the wall and we named it. And my buddy even made me a little plaque to commemorate it.
Oh, that's awesome.
It is the House of Fuckery studio. So
I love it. That's awesome. So before we jump into your playlist today, what was your experience putting that playlist together for me today?
You know what? I chose songs kind of that got a lot of memories attached to them.
Yeah.
But also songs that I loved and songs that I think are killer songs and don't get enough credit sometimes. And some of them, a few of them are pretty well-known songs, but couple of them are, I'm sure, lesser known songs. So and to be honest, I'm going to be completely honest, I don't even remember what 10 I chose.
That's okay. We're going to go through them and we're going to start with your first one. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm going to pull my little list up here and kind of
you're going to cheat. Rock and Roll is King. It's a great tune.
So that one, as a wrestling fanatic, the Saturday mornings as a teenager were pretty much dedicated to it was NWA at the time, but it became WCW. I didn't do anything on Saturday mornings until I got to see the Rock and Roll Express.
Oh.
And that was their entrance music. And for the longest time, I didn't know what it was. I just knew it was Rock and Roll Express entrance music. And my Uncle Marty, who I got so much of my musical knowledge from, came over one morning. I was watching and they come out and he walked through and he's like, "Oh, Rock and Roll is King." I was like, "What?" He goes, "That song, Electric Light Orchestra, Rock and Roll is King." And I had been trying to, find this song forever, like what it was. And I thought it was something that they had written for them. And he goes, "No, it's Electric Light Orchestra. It's on blah, blah, blah record." And I was like, "Take me to the record store now. I want that record." And he did. He drove me, like 35 miles because
Wow.
I grew up way out in the country. Like the running joke among my friends was my dad was a truck driver because he brought us our sunshine. So that's how we got sunshine. His dad brought it on his truck. But
I love that. Who are your top 3 favorite wrestlers?
Well, depends on if you want to go into tag teams or singles, I guess. Rock and Roll Express is definitely out there, would be in top 3. Probably, I'd say Sting was probably one of them.
Yeah.
Just because I love Sting and everything he's done. And the other one is kind of an oddball pick, is Magnum TA. Magnum was one of them wrestlers that he had his career cut short because of the motorcycle accident. But so many wrestlers after him, their entire gimmick was based on what Magnum did first back in the 80s.
Yeah.
Whether it was John Layfield, whether it was, Rick Rude, whether it was James Storm, whether it's Adam Page, they're all based on that sort of blue collar cowboy motorcycle riding, beer drinking. Even Steve Austin has said that, that gimmick, Michael Hayes said that gimmick kind of originated from what Magnum TA was. And I loved Magnum. Magnum was that consummate blue collar guy, and he was Dusty Rhodes' partner and whatnot. So blonde hair, long blonde hair.
Yeah.
So I just liked Magnum. There was something about Magnum that you had to like. He was always that hero that was going to come back in the end. No matter how much you beat him down, he was always going to come back. And just reminded me of a lot of people I knew growing up. Like a lot of my friends' dads were like Magnum in person, so kind of always related to Magnum. And there were a few that scared the shit out of me. Truthfully, Nikita Koloff was one. Yeah. Nikita is actually a minister now. One of the nicest guys I've ever met. But Nikita was terrifying as a wrestler, man. That he had, and that Russian sickle, man, it was just vicious. And there was a few others that I definitely, as a child, was pretty intimidated by. Vader was one of them. Vader was always very intimidating. And Haku, they say Haku was the toughest man to ever step in a wrestling ring, and he was another one that, that he had no chill side. Like Haku walked in that ring and he was there to kill your ass and go home. That was it. That was like the only speed or gear that Haku had was like destroy. So
I miss wrestling back in the day to where it is now, right?
I still like it. I mean, I still love wrestling, but there's something about the old days that
it didn't seem fake back then. Now it's like maybe it's just because we're older and we're watching it and we're like, that's totally fake. Back then it was just seems so
like when you were a kid, you didn't realize that a lot of those guys went to the bar together and drank together. There was that kayfabe of it, there was that division, and now there isn't. You see Damian Priest and Dominic Mysterio be the bad guy, and then they'll turn around 10 minutes later and show them meeting Make-A-Wish kids.
Yeah.
And it was like, you would have never seen Larry Zbyszko or Harley Race or Roddy Piper doing Make-A-Wish stuff because it would have completely destroyed their character. You would have never seen Nikita Koloff Vader doing, USA for the troops type of stuff because it wasn't what they were. And they took that really, really serious back then. Like it was a lifestyle.
It definitely was. And I think back then they were obviously paving the way for people now wrestling, but back then they were just like coming up with random shit. They're like, let's try this. Let's try this.
And you had the territory. So you could go from one to the other, and you could go from Texas to Tennessee to Ohio Valley to New England, and they were completely different places. And now it's just, you know,
Hollywood.
AEW, you have WWE, and you have NWA, which I'm not going to say a lot about them because it's owned by Billy Corgan, and
it is what it is.
Yeah, we won't get into.
All right,
we won't get into the giant walking penis.
That's right. Let's not do that. Like Kesha.
They would make a perfect couple.
That's right. They definitely would. All right, next song. Great song title though. Dead, Jail, or Rock and Roll. Like, what a song title.
Yeah. You know, I was a fan of Hanoi Rocks. Michael was the singer of Hanoi Rocks before he went solo. Always a fan of Hanoi Rocks. Huge fan of Slade and Angel and Sweet and those glam bands. But when Michael went solo after Vince Neil killed Razzle and all of that, and all that happened, when this song come out, it was like a bolt of lightning for me. Mainly because growing up on the farm, being the son of a truck driver, I had one mission in life. I was going to be a rock star. And all the teachers, my grandpa, everyone, oh, that's cute, that's cute. What's your backup plan? My backup plan, I was going to be a rock star. That was my backup plan. Like, there was no other mission in life. So I knew from a very early age that I was either going to be dead in jail or I was going to play rock and roll. And, you know, I've played rock and roll and I've been to jail. So I guess I'm just waiting my turn, you know, on the other side. So, but yeah, I mean, it was like I said, when I heard that song, it was literally like, holy shit, he just wrote my life in a song. You know, he's like, when I was a boy, I always wanted, or when I was a boy, can't even remember the lyrics of the song. I have a hard time remembering lyrics because of my brain injury. But anyways, like I said, he said, like, he always knew it was dead, jail, or rock and roll. And it's always been my song, like ever since it come out. I've actually got to interview Michael and we've talked about it. And I have a partial tattoo actually drawn somewhere that is going to go on this arm here. And it's actually themed around the Dead, Jail, or Rock and Roll song and all of that. So
that's really cool.
I showed it to Michael and I told him when it was done, you know, I think if I ever got to meet him, I want him to sign it so that his signature could be tattooed like along with it. And he's like, absolutely. He's like, I think that's the coolest thing ever. Like, it's, you know, he thought it was amazing that somebody connected like that. And he's really one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet. Like, and he just keeps getting better and better. Like, you know, Michael Monroe is one of them guys that he'll put out a record and you think he couldn't possibly do anything better. And then he'll come out with another one and it's even better. And then another one. And it's just like, the man is 60, I think he's 64, 65 years old this year and still putting out records that are just freaking phenomenal, man. Like, it's like, man, I'm so jealous. Like, I wanted to be Michael, you know? So
share a little bit about what it was like growing up on a farm and obviously being a son of a truck driver.
A lot of hard work, yeah. Whether I wanted it or not.
You probably stand up a lot, right? You like, how long was your dad gone for?
You know, my dad, sometimes he would be home for periods of time, but the majority of the time my dad was gone for a month at a time. He'd come home towards the end of the month and you know, he might be home for 3 hours, he might be home for 10 hours, but he'd be gone again, you know. So there'd be whole stretches of the month where and this was during the time when there were no cell phones or computers or nothing. So
yeah,
you know, he didn't even call home. Like, he was just gone. Like, we knew, I mean, we were well off because of it. My dad made a lot of money as a truck driver. Like, that truck was always moving and, my dad, even back in the 80s, made $2,000 a week driving that truck. So, we were pretty well off. Like,
Yeah.
we didn't live like it. You would have never known, but we knew what my dad made, and $2,000 a week back then was pretty good money for the 80s to make $100,000 a year. You didn't even have a degree, like you were just driving a truck, but it a lot of hard work. I mean, I had to do things that I hated. I babysat all the time because my stepmother worked. So I had a brother and sister that I took care of from a very early age, and house was heated by a wood stove. So I was responsible for cutting a lot of the wood. Like we would cut wood on Saturdays. The whole family would get together, my grandpa and my Uncle Marty and Dad if he was home, and me, and we'd all go out and we'd cut all the wood and we'd bring it back, and it got chopped up and divided between everybody. But being the consummate smart ass.
We had a wood stove too, and
and being the consummate smart ass, I always thought I was smarter than everybody. And my grandfather, who is currently 96 years old and still tough as John Wayne leather, was always smarter than me. Like I didn't challenge him so much, but I would make smart little remarks thinking I was cute or thinking I was quick. And my grandfather just always had a reply. Like I didn't want to go cut wood one morning. I wanted to watch wrestling. So I asked my grandpa, I said, "Hey, can I stay home today?" I said, "I don't feel like going out." Grandpa's like, "Yeah, absolutely. You can stay home." I said, "Awesome." Started to walk away. Before I could even get about 3 foot away, the old boy looked me dead in my face and said, "Gonna be awfully cold sleeping on the porch though." Ready in 5. Like he was like that. Like, we had the running joke in the house that me and my brother, we were so bad growing up that by the time we grew up, my grandpa's willow tree was a stump. So I asked my grandpa one day, "What are you going to do if that willow tree runs out of branches?" I didn't think he'd have an answer. He didn't have to think about it. Turned around, looked me dead in my face and said, "Don't you worry, boy. If that tree runs out of branches," said, "your grandma got plenty of rose bushes out back." My brother come around the corner. "What'd he say? What'd he say?" "You better straighten your ass up or you're in trouble." Like I got the message, man. I was like, "Nope, fucking with no rose bushes, man." So
did your parents influence your music at all? Like what kind of music did your dad listen to and your stepmom?
My dad did a lot. My dad did a lot. My stepmom a little bit. My stepmom was really into Motown.
Okay.
So I have more of an appreciation for Motown now than I did back then.
Yeah.
My dad was very much into stuff like Electric Light Orchestra. Bob Seger is my dad's number one thing. My dad will physically fight you over Bob Seger. Like, I mean, and I mean that in the literal sense. Like if you were to walk up to my dad and say Bob Seger is an asshole, he will fight you in the parking lot over that. He's just very touchy about Bob Seger. So I listened to a lot of Bob Seger. I listened to a lot of Bad Company. Boston was a band that their debut record, I wore out so many copies of that Boston record. I'd play them until you just literally wear the grooves out of them. The Doobie Brothers, Led Zeppelin, even though I wasn't a huge Led Zeppelin fan. REO Speedwagon, heard a ton of that. Nugent was somebody we played a lot. My Uncle Marty, I think more than my dad, because my Uncle Marty, even to this day, has a massive music collection of vinyl. He has them in milk crates. And if you go in my Uncle Marty's house, the back wall of his living room, from the floor to the ceiling, is milk crates stacked up with all his vinyl.
Wow.
I'd say he's probably got 4,000 or 5,000 vinyl, from across the years. And if you can name it from that era, he's got it, whether it's Dan Fogelberg or Clapton or, whether it's the Eagles or whether it's.
He likes all the good guys.
Yeah, like I spent time at my uncle's house because he has that old Kenwood stereo with the trash can headphones, and I would go there and I would sit in front of the stereo and I would just listen to records for hours and read the liner notes and read all the stuff. So, a great bit of my knowledge came from my Uncle Marty's music collection. So
that's awesome. I love that though. Like, I love that, my parents, my mom loved like the Rolling Stones and Led Zeppelin and all of that. And then my stepdad was 11 years older than my mom. So then I was, Jerry Lee Lewis, Chuck Berry, he liked kind of all that kind of 50s music. So when I was growing up, I had all this assortment of music, and I'm grateful for that because it allowed me to where I am today, where it's not like I'm just one, it's just classical rock, or it's like I love everything because they listen to such different music together, and they could, still live together with totally different music tastes. When I met my husband, even though I was like I listened to a lot of old school punk. He was not new school punk, but my old school punk was like, Butthole Surfers, Dead Milkman, like that kind of stuff. Yeah, exactly. And he was more like Rancid and, Bad Religion. Not that that's bad, and I love them, but it was cool that we listened to punk, but it was totally different two realms of punk. But I loved like 80s and hairband and like, all of that stuff.
I get it. Like
that somebody influenced you with that.
The crazy thing with me is I've gone through phases in life where I've gone from one place to another, or I've been shuffled around, whether it was through my dad sending me to live with my mom, or my mom sending me back, or me living at my grandpa's house because my dad was gone all the time and I hated my stepmom, whether it was being in foster care. I've gone through all these different places that I've lived in. Each one of them, I've been introduced to music in little pieces here and there. So I've been
exposed to lots of music, which is
I've been this sponge.
Yeah.
So it's kind of how I got my nickname from a teacher, and it comes from, started out with the classic rock stuff that we listened to in the truck with my dad. And then my stepmom come along and I started staying with her, and she listened to R&B, and I would listen to Casey Kasem and Rick D. So I heard the pop stuff. And then, at 13, my dad sent me to live in California with my mom because I did some dumb shit and got in trouble. And, being from a very small town, it was all over town that, he did this. So dad's like, hey, we got to shuffle you out of town for a while for the smoke to clear. So, so I went to California. Well, dad sent me to California in the very early months of 1983, right as Def Leppard, Quiet Riot,
Motley Crue,
all of those bands were starting to break. Mom lived 2.5 blocks off of Sunset Strip. So 13-year-old me went from living on a 400-acre farm to being dropped dead in the
tight pants
of the hair metal shit. And of course, mom worked in Redondo Beach, had to take a bus every morning for hours. So she would be like, get up and go to school. Yeah, of course, because a 13-year-old kid's definitely going to school instead of hanging out on the Sunset Strip with all the rock guys that he wanted to be and all the hot women that were barely dressed in anything and, getting on the bus and going to Venice Beach and shit like that. Like, I didn't go to school. Like, fuck school. Like, I mean, I did go to school, but
I know what you're saying. Yeah, it's awesome. I love it.
Yeah. So, but I went from that, and then I come back, and my cousin had gotten into punk. Said, hey, you got to hear this new band called Dirty Rotten Imbeciles. Sweet. And that led to Gangrene. That led to the Dropkick Murphys. That led to Malachi Crunch. That led to Agnostic Front and Madball and all of those bands. And then it went from there. I had a friend who introduced me to Bob Marley, and I got into reggae. And then my uncle bought a hotel in the Cayman Islands. So I started working for him in the summer. So I got to see the reggae
culture
firsthand because they had a house band there and it was a reggae band. So I come back from that and started college, and my first roommate come in. He was this black dude, and he's like, "Man, check this record out. It's this dude named Ice-T." I was introduced to Ice-T and Public Enemy and X-Clan and Two Live Crew and all of that. So I've kind of gone from place to place, picking up this music along the way. And now here I am at 50 plus ish, and I've got 3.5 million songs in my collection across 100 genres, and this stupid amount of knowledge that is really good for nothing other than doing it. You know, like,
and this lady tells me to pick 10 fucking songs, and how am I supposed to do that?
And that was like 10. Like, so I really I picked songs that are sort of directly related to my life.
Yeah.
Like there's a story with each one of them. So
all right. Let's get back to the story.
Yeah, so including the next one. That,
Let's hit it. Let's play it. So Highway Song, Blackfoot.
Yeah. Another day, another dollar. After I scream and holler. That was me and my dad's song. Really, that was one of the songs, you know, as a truck driver, staring at the highway for endless hours. That was a song that was just kind of personal to us. Like it was, I don't get along well with my dad. I've spoken to my dad probably 3 times in 35 years. Sadly. So that's one of the few good memories I have with my dad is us listening to that song. Also the song Roll Me Away by Bob Seger is another one that we kind of had this mix of songs that were like we kind of classified as driving music or road music. And they were mostly songs about being on the road. So Highway Song was the main one. It was just.
Is there a reason why you don't have a relationship with your dad?
A lot of it has to do with the relationship I had with my stepmother. And when shit went down, I ended up in foster care and dad took her side instead of my side. But you know, it is what it is. Like I don't have hard feelings personally. It just is what it is. Like life goes on.
That's right. So
I'm not going to let that shit poison, you know, like I have sole custody of my 11, soon to be 12-year-old. And I'm not going to let that make me be less of a father. Yeah. In fact, it's the opposite. Like I have vowed my whole life, I will never make the mistakes my dad. Like I can tell you, and this is going to sound bad, I can tell you the single one time my dad has ever said, "I love you" to me. And it was July 8th, 1976, and it was at 7:38 p.m. It was the day he married my stepmother. It was after the reception. I had been running around dancing all night, and I was tired. And they had a 76 Camaro. It was parked right outside the side door of the hall where they had the reception, right behind the, you know, bride and groom's table. So dad took me outside, picked me up, took me outside, put me in the back seat, covered me up, and said, "I love you." That was the only time in my life that my dad has ever said that.
Wow.
It shocked me then because up to that point, he'd never said it even at that point, at almost 7, 8 years old. And I'm not going to be that kind of dad. And I tell my sons, all of them, like, I love you every single day. Like, I don't ever want them to not know. And I don't know. Like, I don't have hard feelings. Like I said, I'm not angry about it. It just is what it is. I wish it would have been different, but it wasn't. So I moved on and I lived a lot of adventures because dad wasn't there to stop me from doing a lot of dumb, stupid shit. So
I have a dad like that too. I barely know him. He has my name tattooed on his arm. And I'm like, why do you even have my fucking name tattooed on your arm?
Yeah,
Like, you don't even know who I am.
Yeah, like I think I went into foster care when I was 15. I didn't speak to my dad again until I was almost, God, I think it was 28, 29. I was in Little Rock, and he just called me one day. I was outside raking leaves. My cell phone rang, and I didn't recognize the number. So I picked the phone up. I said, hello. He's like, hey, what are you doing? Who the fuck is this? He's like, it's your dad. Fuck, did you even get my number? Like, like I've moved like 314 times since the last time I saw you. Nobody had my number in the family. Like, I don't even know how dad got my number. But it's all right, cool, So we talked for a while and things were cool. Said, if you ever get back up this way, blah, blah, blah. So Christmas rolled around. We drove up there. And he acted like an asshole the whole night and ended up having a screaming match with him in the kitchen in front of my great grandma. And I was done after that. And didn't talk to him again.
It's a lot of pent up stuff, right? Like,
it's just, like I said, I'm not angry about it. It's just my dad has spent so long being a truck driver, being alone in that truck.
Yeah.
He doesn't know how to communicate.
Yeah.
And I'm the opposite. Like, I'll talk your head off. So I don't have a problem communicating. And I don't mince words. If I got a problem with you, you're going to know it. I'm going to tell you, in multiple languages sometimes. But my dad is the opposite. Like, he'll have an attitude and you can tell he has an attitude, but he won't tell you anything is wrong. He just has that look.
Yeah.
And the last time I tried, I think it was 2010, I had gotten married and had the stepkids and, my kids, and my youngest one had just been born, and I wanted him to meet him. And we went to this restaurant and, we sat there for 2 hours. And, in 2 hours, that man probably said 3 words. I sat there the whole night talking to him, asking him questions, and he was like, yep.
Crazy.
Like, and after 2 hours, I just said, you know what? I'm done. Like, I got better things to do. Like, I'm not, you can't get blood from a turnip, and I was just like, fuck it. If you don't want to try, dude, if you don't want to put the effort through, I love you. You're my dad. I respect you. Tough as nails, just like my grandfather is, because he doesn't know any better. But I'm not going to exert all of this effort.
Yeah, you got to meet me halfway. It's got to work.
Yeah, so I was just like, fuck it, I'm done. And we haven't spoken since. And, I went to jail, unfortunately, about a year later. And my ex-wife called my dad to get the money to get me out of jail, which pissed me off because I was like, look, I would have only had to serve like 4 or 5 days in jail, but you paid them $800 that they didn't rightfully deserve. So now I owed my dad a bunch of money, which is one of the worst things,
Yeah.
And I was like, of everyone in my fucking family you could have called my dad, like the guy I don't speak to. So of course, Dad's still like, you didn't pay me my money back. Well, technically, I didn't borrow the money. She borrowed the money. So if you want your money, get it from her. Like, 'cause let's be honest, bro. I would have never called you for the money. Like, so, don't make me responsible for money I never borrowed or would have borrowed to begin with. I was perfectly content sitting my ass in jail for the 4 or 5 days when they would have let me in. Like, I wasn't fucked up about it. Like, but whatever. It just
is what it is, right?
Yeah. So,
all right, let's get on to the next song. Evergrey.
Strangely enough, we segued perfectly into that one, because Monday Morning Apocalypse literally is a record that Tom England the singer of Evergrey, actually wrote it about his failed relationship with his father and all of the shit that his father put him through, with the abuse and the name calling and all of that. So Monday Morning Apocalypse is literally Tom saying, how long are you going to hold me underwater and make me feel like I'm drowning?
Yeah.
It just was another record that when it come out, this whole record was pretty much Tom laying his pain pretty bare of how he felt about his dad and the animosity that you could tell he had. And I was just like, you know what? I feel that. Like I'm not mad about it, but I feel it. Like I can really relate to the frustration more than the anger. So that's very much where that song comes from, is just,
Well, I'm curious, just because obviously you like such a wide range of music. What was your first concert you ever went to?
Uncle Marty took me to a show. I was 11 years old. I got to see 38 Special and Iron Maiden.
Oh, nice.
Open for Rainbow. That was my very first show. It was, I want to say it was March 16th of 1982 at Wing Stadium in Kalamazoo. And at the time, I really didn't understand the significance of it. Now I look back on it and I think 38 Special and Iron Maiden opening for Rainbow. That's a clusterfuck of bands to have open for. Like you have a Southern rock band opening for a metal band who's opening for essentially a blues-based rock band.
Well, back then they probably took whatever gig they could fucking get.
Well, they took what the label told them to do.
Yeah.
Back then you were contractually obligated. If the label said go out, and all three of those bands were major label bands. Now Maiden was just starting out, but again, they were not in a position to say, no, we're not going to take this tour. You took what they gave you. So
at 11, what did you think of Eddie?
I thought it was awesome.
Yeah, I bet.
One of the first metal shows I ever saw. I didn't get full blown into metal yet. I was still very much more into I loved loud music, but I was still much more into like the Nugent and Bob Seger, and Slade was a band that I was massively into. Like Slade, even when Quiet Riot first come out, when they released Come On Feel the Noise, all my friends were like, oh, that's a fucking dude, that's a Slade song. My friends were like, what? That's a Slade, they stole a Slade song, and my friends didn't know who Slade was. And I knew. So then they did the second record, Condition Critical, and they released Mama Mama We're All Crazy Now. And I was like, oh, they did another Slade song, So I make the joke now, and it pisses people off that Quiet Riot were the world's best Slade tribute band. And everyone's, oh, they did more than Slade. Well, yeah, but 2 of their 3 biggest songs were Slade covers. So am I really wrong by calling them the world's best Slade tribute band? Like, honestly, listen to Slade singer and listen to Kevin DeBrow, and they're really, really freaking close, man. Like they're, so I don't think it was intentional, honestly. Like I don't think Kevin tried to sound like the other guy, but I think it was just what he did naturally.
Yeah.
And that's fine. Like it's cool. Like some people sound like
back
Zeppelin.
then they all kind of sounded the same. Like they're all dressing the same. They were all doing kind of the same thing.
It was awesome because, Boston, when you listen to Boston, when you listen to bands like REO Speedwagon, when you listen to Bad Company and those bands, Queen, they were big and bombastic and loud. But hair metal come along and they just took it up a notch.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Quiet Riot and LA Guns and Winger and those bands, they took it up a notch, man. They had it was bigger hair and flashier clothes and better guitar amps that were louder.
I agree.
So it was we were just another band out of Boston. That was a great song, but it didn't really compare to Come On, Feel the Noise.
Yeah.
So it was like, it was just, they had taken that sound and they just amped
And you
it up.
wanted to listen to it loud. You wanted to like
I mean, that's what it
blow
was
your
meant for.
speakers
And,
up. Yeah.
and it just got bigger and bigger. Like when I got into punk was that other thing. Like punk was that next level. Whether you listen to the Ramones and Crass, which were more basic, punk, or whether it was, Dirty Rotten Imbeciles and Gang Green, which was 150 miles an hour, or whether it was, the Dead Kennedys and the Circle Jerks, which was more political. And when I heard the Dead Kennedys, that was another thing, because Rollins was just, Rollins was just next level, like the shit the dude said. And then he left not Dead Kennedys, Black Flag. I'm sorry. Black Flag was with Henry Rollins, man. When Rollins went solo and started doing spoken word, I don't agree politically with much of what Rollins says, but you can't listen to Henry Rollins and not say, "Holy shit, that's a smart motherfucker," and he believes it with his whole heart, and that's awesome. Like, I don't have to agree with you. Like, it's just, I've seen Henry Rollins live, and there's really nothing to compare it to, because the guy is, he can go from the most serious whisper to cracking a joke on the drop of a dime. And it's like, that's talent. Like, to go from telling the story of coming home from the store with your best friend and watching your best friend die in your arms in your living room, to, yeah, U2 has millions of fans, I'm not one of them. It just that quick. It's like, that takes a true talent to switch gears like that, man, and to code switch. And I think I love Henry Rollins. I think he's fucking incredible. So God bless Henry,
Sure, I love it. So you've now obviously are a truck driver, and so
I was.
You were. So what is kind of your favorite city that you've traveled through?
Hated the East Coast.
Yeah?
Hated the East Coast. Not because of the places so much. Driving a semi through places around the East Coast, Baltimore, up that way, New Jersey, all of that, really fucking difficult. And the Port of Philly is the worst place in the fucking world. Like, it's just, no offense to anyone from Pennsylvania who's listening, but they could turn Pennsylvania into a parking lot and it would not hurt my feelings in the fucking least. But I love the West Coast. I wouldn't say the West Coast, but Wyoming, Utah, Montana were probably my favorite, because it was just so, there's a beauty in that area that is just hard to describe unless you see it. It's so big and so majestic. When Yellowstone, the TV show, come out, and I was like, man, I've driven through there. Like, and there's nothing like it to have mountains on both sides of you.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Even wake up in the morning and just to see that, was fucking surreal. Texas is pretty crazy. Texas is pretty extreme. Like, you can go from a shit ton of traffic to no traffic in Texas pretty easily. Kansas and Nebraska are crazy because it's so flat that you can see something in the distance. And Kansas especially, like, I didn't realize this until I drove it. Like, the first time alone, I saw the silo in the distance. And I could have swore that silo was just down the road. And I started driving and I counted, and that silo was like 7 miles away. And it looked like it was 100 yards down the road. It was so flat that it's so deceptive in Kansas.
Yeah.
But beautiful. I mean, nonetheless, Iowa too. Iowa's another place that's super flat, shit tons of corn. But, it's great to drive in because it's easy to drive, like you don't have to drive up mountains or down mountains.
Yeah.
Tennessee is a real challenge to drive in. Driving through the Smoky Mountains when you're pulling 85,000 pounds is, challenging at best.
Do you have any crazy, what about some crazy truck driver stories? You can share one?
I think my craziest one was before I started driving. I was actually with my dad. I was 7. I think I was 7, just turned 8 maybe. And we stopped for dinner one night. And as we were coming around the backside of the truck stop, seen this semi-truck sitting there. And I told my dad, I said, Dad, I said, it's the snowman's truck. It was a truck from Smokey and the Bandit.
No way.
It was Jerry Reed's truck. And I was like, snowman's truck. Dad's like, nah, just some trucker who got a goddamn truck that looks like, Smokey and the Bandit fan. All right, logical explanation for a 7-year-old. So we go in the truck stop, walk through, sit down. We order. I got to go to the bathroom. I get up, start walking to the bathroom, come around the corner, walk towards the bathroom. In the very back booth, Jerry Reed sitting there with about 7 other guys. I immediately know it's Jerry Reed. Pretty hard to mistake Jerry Reed. So I stop dead in my tracks. I turn around. I run back to the table. I tell Dad, I said, man, Dad, Jerry Reed's in the back. That is the snowman's truck. Dad's like, oh, it ain't Jerry. It's just some guy who looks like Jerry. Even 7-year-old me was like, no, that's Jerry Reed, bro. Like, it's, I know Jerry Reed when I see Jerry Reed. So, being the bullheaded, sarcastic little asshole that I was, like, I stopped dead at the table and I looked at him like that. And he's like, can I help you, son? Like, are you Jerry Reed? He said, yes, I am. I said, my dad said it wasn't you. I knew it was you. Jerry's like, well, where's your dad at? I said, he's over there. Jerry stands up, yells across this restaurant. He's like, son, come on over here and have dinner with us. My dad stands up and looks, and his eyes are like big around. He's like, holy shit, it's Jerry Reed. So we had to have dinner with Jerry Reed. What it was, they were filming Smokey and the Bandit too.
No way.
And they were filming the road scenes, and they were away from catering, and they got hungry, so they stopped to have dinner.
Crazy.
And he just wandered upon them. So, extremely nice guy, extremely funny. But much like all of the other times, I was 7 years old, sitting at a table of adults who paid no mind to the 7-year-old sitting there. So they were telling jokes that were completely inappropriate for a 7-year-old. And I didn't say nothing. I just kept my mouth shut and listened. And that's what got me into trouble, because by the time I was 8 and started actual school, I knew every Gene Tracy and Catfish and Elmer Fuddpucker and if there was a trucker joke to be told, I knew it. So I went to school. They sent me to school, and all my friends were like, knock, 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 knock. I'm like, man, fuck a knock, knock joke. Do you hear the one about the chicken? Do you hear the one about the chicken house? My teacher, you can't tell that joke. Why? I know how it goes. I didn't understand at 7 or 8 years old that it was inappropriate to do that. So I raised kinds of hell growing up, because I was always that kid with smart ass remark or smart comment. I read too much and I knew shit that you weren't supposed to know. I read books about history, except I didn't read the books about history. I read the books about history that they didn't tell you in school. Shit that you weren't supposed to know. Helen Keller, the blind, cute little girl who learned to read and write. Yeah, did you know when Helen Keller was a adult, she would become a hardcore communist and wrote books about overthrowing the U.S. government? Well, this was during the 80s when communist was a bad word. You didn't say communist. So, of course, fifth grade teacher, we're going to watch a movie called The Miracle Worker. Awesome. We watched the movie. Fifth grade me volunteers. Hey, did you know Helen Keller grew up to be a communist and wrote books about overthrowing the government? Get out.
You're out of here.
Go to the office. And of course, Dad would get the call, or my stepmom would get the call. Your son's in the office. What do you do? Oh, he said Helen Keller was a communist. My grandpa, he always defended me. Well, it's not lying. I can bring you the proof. And the teacher's like, well, he knows better than to say stuff like that. It's disruptive, and he only does it to make the teachers look stupid. Of course, my grandpa would always be like, well, trust me, I've met most of the teachers in that school, and they don't need a lot of help with that. So I come from a family of smartasses. So
that's right. It's awesome. All right, next song. I love it.
Oh, yeah. That's my karaoke song.
This is your karaoke song?
That's my karaoke song. You take me to karaoke. Take me to karaoke, and I promise you, before the night is out, that a horribly butchered version of Making Love Out of Nothing at All will be sung, because that it's people always say, what's your guilty pleasure? Or, what band is your guilty pleasure? And Air Supply is kind of mine. I don't think it's a guilty pleasure because I love them, but most of my friends know me as the punk guy, the metal guy, the hardcore guy. So, by looking at what's on my wall, you would probably never guess that I'm a massive Air Supply fan, and I have every record in their collection, including the 2 solo records that Graham and him have done. So, yes, I love Air Supply. More than that, I love Jim Steinman, because Jim Steinman wrote that song. He also wrote Bat Out of Hell. He wrote Total Eclipse of the Heart. And a lot of people don't know that Making Love Out of Nothing at All was actually supposed to be a Bonnie Tyler song. And
makes sense, though. She could kill it.
Bonnie rejected it. So he gave it to Graham Russell, who recorded it. And then Bonnie changed her mind later and recorded her own version of it. And Total Eclipse of the Heart was actually supposed to be an REO Speedwagon song that Bonnie got to first and recorded it. So there's these, little stories that, again, just stupid knowledge. It's really good for nothing other than this. So
I love it. So I want you to share a little bit about your podcast. When did it start? How did it get started? What's it about?
I actually started before the podcast. I did internet radio. I had a former friend who had a radio show, and I would call in and do this. I would make stupid comments. I would tell jokes. I would just he was someone who was very quick-witted, very sharp tongue, and very good at comebacks. So I would call his show just to try to throw him off his script, basically. And I was very good at it. So he showed up at my house one day with this box. Okay, the fuck is that? It was a Behringer podcasting kit. Okay, awesome. No fucking idea how to use it. Were you going to learn? Okay, so we set it all up, and I started recording, and the first couple shows were horrible because I didn't really understand quite how to use the mixer yet. And my playlists were awesome, but the sound quality wasn't there. So once I figured that out, I did live internet radio, and it was on, he had his own little station. So I did my radio show every Thursday night and Saturday night. I had first show was called Auditory Slam. That was the rock show. And then on Saturday night, I did a country show called Backroads Radio. And it was all country and Americana, bluegrass, all that kind of shit. So I played this massive amount of music, and I would interview people and take calls and just sort of do this, what I'm doing now, essentially. And I did that for a long time. And I finally hit a wall to where, you know, I put 30, 35 hours a week into these two shows, and I'm not getting paid for it. I'm not making any money. It's a really expensive hobby. But you can't really monetize an internet radio show that much. So, of course, another buddy comes along and says, well, you know, if you turn it into a podcast, put it on YouTube, you could do this, you could do that, you could monetize it, yada, yada, yada. Cha-ching, you're talking my kind of music now. You're talking money here. So I went from a live internet show to a podcast. And that was even better because now I can kind of record on my own and take my time and pick and choose my topics. And it's been pretty freaking surreal. Like, I have interviewed some of my biggest musical heroes, people that 15, 16-year-old me lying on a bed in a foster home. You know, I was your typical teenage kid. I had my wall covered in pages of Metal Age and Circus and Rolling Stone, and those collages of pictures went with me from house to house to house to house. And you could never have convinced 16-year-old me that I would get to interview Michael Monroe. You'd never been able to convince me that I would interview Mitch Malloy. I'd interview the Tesla guys. I'd interview the guys from Great White. It never convinced me that I'm extremely good friends with Ron Keel, who, you know, one of the very first records I bought with my own money was The Right to Rock. Saw him in concert numerous times in California, and you could have never convinced me that as an adult, I could take this right here, go in my contacts and hit Ron Keel and call him up and be like, hey, want to come to dinner Saturday night? You know, are you going to be in town? You know, like, it just, that's what it's done. So it's still surreal to me. 10 years, almost 11 years later, I still do interviews, and it never gets old. That feeling never goes away of, holy shit, I'm really interviewing such and such. And, you know, like, I've got to interview through hip hop, through country, through punk, through metal. I've interviewed some of my biggest heroes, you know, and that's crazy to me to do that and to know that. And I hope it never changes, you know, like, I love that the internet has kind of opened up that and allowed us to, all of us, you know, like, whatever level you're on as a podcaster or an internet radio person or a YouTube person. And when I started the YouTube channel, I love music reactions. I'm going to do music reactions. And I love music reactions, but there's certain ones that they drive me crazy. You know, the ones that do the reaction, they'll listen to 30 seconds and stop and they'll talk. And then they'll listen to another 30 seconds, stop and talk. That drives me fucking crazy. Just listen to the goddamn song and then give your reaction at the end. But that start, stop, start, stop, start, stop.
Yeah.
The other thing is the ones who you can obviously tell are just fake as shit. They're the ones that, you know, jump up and kick the chair over, throw the headphones, or they'll get up and they'll, oh, dude, seriously, like, it's a good song, but it ain't that fucking good. Like, you know, come on, bro. Like, you know, it's good, but it ain't throw a $300 pair of Beats by Dre good. Okay, like, come on, bro. It's, you know, as a musician, it's kind of like dropping the mic. Mic drop. No, bro, you just dropped $185 Shure S1 microphone on the floor. Now, the musician in me wants to punch you in the face because that's a $185 microphone. And 90% of us podcasters cannot afford a $185 microphone to do this shit. We operate on $20 Amazon specials.
That's right.
So, that part of me was kind of like, I can do better. Nobody wants to listen to the 50-year-old know-it-all talk about obscure bands. I figured, okay, I'll do these reactions. I'll probably, much like the radio show, I'll get 15 or 20 listens and cool, whatever. On my 363rd day of doing the reaction channel, I had 14,800 subscribers and I hit 1 million views. So I was like, okay, holy shit. Maybe people do want to listen to the old guy ramble on about obscure shit. So go with it,
No, I love your passion for it. That's awesome. And I think more people need to have more passion in their podcast, not just doing a podcast to do a podcast. I've been asked to be a guest on quite a few podcasts, and from when I do my podcast and then I go and be a guest on somebody else's podcast, like I just was a little while ago, and I was kind of mortified. Like it was really disorganized, and it was like I was like, and it seems like that a lot when I'm a guest, and I'm like, this is fucking like this. I don't know where this is gonna go, but I feel like I'm organized and I do my research, and I feel like the energy is high, and I allow my guests to talk and we have some fun. I feel like I'm controlling the podcast when I'm on a guest podcast, because I feel like if I don't like dead air. So it's like, if my guests are filling the air, I'm not going to interrupt them. But if there's air to be filled, I'm going to fill that, and I'm comfortable with that. That's just the type of person I am. So it's kind of crazy to see what's out there, especially when you want to, like I'm talking about me, especially when I want to be so successful with this. And this is what I'm fucking competing with.
Right.
That's the part that drives me up the fucking wall.
Right. And that's the thing. Like I've been, I won't say I've been a guest on a ton, but I've been a guest on a few. And there were some that you could tell they were built for it. And then there was a few that it was just kind of like, okay, awesome. Like, hey, thanks for having me, but don't fucking expect me to go out of my way to really promote this shit. And my shows are, like I said, my shows are kind of a beautiful chaos. I don't have a script 90% of the time.
I like that.
We do the opening, we hit at the basic beginning, and we just kind of go wherever the hell it goes. Now, sometimes that's awesome. Sometimes I've had at least 2 instances I can name where I ended up asking the person, hey, do you mind coming back and redoing this? Because it ended up where it sounded like me being a squirrel got cracked. It ended up like the scene from Ice Age, with the little squirrel chasing that was kind of what it turned out to be. So it was kind of like, that didn't really come across the way I wanted it to. So, let's touch up a few spots, and they're normally pretty, it's fine. I've had a couple interviews with people that were disastrous, either through the artist not wanting to do the interview or the artist just not giving a shit about their career as far as taking it seriously.
Yeah.
I had one band whose name I won't name. They didn't want to talk about the record. They wanted to talk about how drunk they got the night before at the guitar player's wedding. That's what they wanted to talk about. And no matter how much I steered them to their record, which was a phenomenal record. Yeah. Sadly, they didn't give a shit about talking about that record. They got drunk the night before at the guitar player's wedding, and they wanted to tell the stories of the beer they drank and the booze they consumed and this and this and this. And I'm kind of like, it's not what we're here for.
See how people are. It's insane.
Yeah, like it's not what Spine Farm Records contacted me for. Like,
yeah,
like if I wanted to hear some interview somebody about getting drunk, well, I would interview Murphy's Law or Gangrene or
Oh, we could just go down to
specialized.
just like
Yeah,
interview random people outside of a bar.
Right. So Johnny Winters, I interviewed Johnny Winters. Johnny just didn't want to do the interview. Like Johnny was like pulling teeth. God bless his soul. You know, I'm not going to say a single bad thing about Johnny because Johnny's a fucking legend. But you could tell Johnny just had better things to do, and he didn't give a shit about this interview. Like his answers were yes and no. That was it.
That's too bad, though.
He was not going to elaborate, no matter how hard I tried. So it lasted about 7.5 minutes, and I was just like, "Yeah, you know what? We're done." Like I'm just,
Done.
you know, it was like talking to my father.
Yuck.
And I was just like, "Yeah, we're done. It's cool." You know, like I'm not mad about it. It just, I get
the way you wanted it to go.
Yeah, it was Johnny freaking Winters. Like, who am I to tell Johnny Winters about an interview? Like, look, you're Johnny Winters, bro. Like, I ain't gonna hate on it. Like, do your thing. Like, you know,
Let's get to your last song. Are you ready?
Okay.
All right. Okay. Do you want to pick it or do you want me to randomly pick it? Last story of the day.
You know what? Let's go with the Queen one.
Okay, awesome. That's so funny because I was actually going to pick that one.
Yeah, let's go with the Queen one because
All right, here we go. Let me play some of it.
1, 2, 3, 4, 1.
Don't try suicide.
Don't try suicide. So many avenues with this song. One, next to this band right here, who is my all-time favorite band, Pink Floyd, Queen is number 2. Queen, just the epitome of what a great band is. Just complete refusal to play by any rules. Queen did what Queen wanted to do, whether it was Broadway-ish, whether it was rock, whether it was metal-ish, whether it was deep and contemplative. Freddie wrote what Freddie felt. So 1 minute you got Good Old Fashioned Lover Boy, 1 minute you got Best Friend, 1 minute you got Bohemian Rhapsody, and then you got this song, which everybody knows, Another One Bites the Dust, or Under Pressure for those bass lines. But to me, this has the best Queen bass line of all time. That dun 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 dun
Yeah.
dun, dun. I have always wanted to cover this song. For one, it's just a fun song. And you gotta love a song when somebody says, all you do is get on my tits. Which as a kid, completely no idea what that meant. I wasn't British and I was young, so I didn't understand what it meant. But, you know, I was 11 years old and it was fun to say tits. So with everything going on in the world today, through social media, through the internet, through political divisiveness and all of the left, right, me too, us too, you too, blah, 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 blah. The message of this song, so relevant. You know, don't try suicide. It's just, I can't help but think that somebody is missing the opportunity to use this song in an anti-bullying or anti-suicide commercial. Like they're missing the boat, that you could really do something incredible. Also, the fact that no band has ever covered this song. Of all the Queen songs that just scream to be covered, this is one you almost never, ever, ever hear. And it was a B-side to, I can't even remember what it was a B-side to. I think it was, God, I want to say it was Another one, Bites of Dust. But I was in California and I got a 45 at a thrift store. And it was the B-side to it.
Yeah.
And I don't even remember what the A-side is, because the B-side, Don't Try Suicide, was the better song. And it's just one of them songs that's always stuck with me. It's, it's a really consummate Freddie type of song. Like when you think about Freddie Mercury as a person, as the rock star, as the entertainer, don't try suicide, nobody hates. It's such a fucking Freddie song, And again, it's one of my very favorite Queen songs. And for so many reasons, like I said, the bass line and the melody and just the message itself, So it's one of them songs that it just doesn't get enough respect at all. Like it's kind of maddening to me that I will mention this song, and even Queen fans generally won't always know this song. And it's like, how do you not know this song? It's like literally one of the best Queen songs, dude. It's fucking phenomenal. Like,
I love your passion for this song.
I love music. Like music.
Yeah,
music.
You can tell. You could talk for hours on it, right? Which is good. And I so appreciate you coming on Music Junkies today and sharing some of your songs and some of your stories. But before I let you go, I would love for you to share some words of wisdom to the viewers.
Words of wisdom. Number one, I think the biggest thing, I said it in the biography, family is utmost of importance to me because of the way I was raised and all that. All my family right now, we share this big house, and I have my two oldest sons here. I have my youngest son here. Their families, we share the house with my mom, and nothing's more important to me than family. So remember that friends come and go, acquaintances come and go. I realize family can be toxic sometimes, and even us as a unit, we have our days where we want to choke the shit out of each other, but I don't know how I would do it without my mom and without my sons and everyone else. Family is so important. So remember that at the end of the day, you have to answer for yourself and those that you've raised or are raising. So don't ever take that for granted. Like, when you lose that, you don't get it back. When your children grow up and they move on, you're like cats in the cradle, the song Cats in the Cradle,
Yeah.
You can't get that time back. So don't take
the moment.
Yeah, like don't ever take that for granted. No matter how much you think life is moving on or how fast life is going, take that time to tell your kids, I love you. Tell your parents you love them. Tell your brother and sister you love them, because you don't know when it is they'll be gone. Like, it can happen so fast, and I've had it happen so many times where I've literally spoken to someone, said, I'll talk to you tomorrow. And then you wake up in the morning and it's like, oh, well, such and such died.
Yeah, it's
literally just talked to him 2 hours ago.
Yeah, such great words of wisdom. I appreciate you so much, CJ, for being on the show. Like, follow, subscribe. I will give you all of his social media content. You can go check out his podcast.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining me today. I so appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Like, I love doing this. So if anyone wants to check out any of my stuff, just type in the music god CJ Plain into you Google. You'll get the YouTube channel, you get the podcast, the Noise Report. There's also a second podcast that is kind of dormant right now, but we're going to bring it back. It's going to be called the Loud List. It's going to be where we're going to do like top 5 lists and top 10 lists of really crazy, random, silly shit. So, yeah. And the rest of the playlist is there too. She'll have, there's a ton of other cool music on there too, with some reggae and some alternative and some country and some blues and even some Australian stuff. So, yeah, if you like the randomness of the previous songs, there's a bunch more.
Love it. Awesome.